So that was my attempt. Welcome everybody online as well. Community Disability Alliance in the Hunter is a complex beast, so bear with me. And seriously, any questions you've got along the way, please ask, because rather than waiting to the end, because some of my ex-TAFE teacher background, I'd like to hear that people are interested. So CDAH, or the Community Disability Alliance in the Hunter, was basically, as a quick tour and a quick history, was founded in 2012-2013 as a response to the pilot of the NDIS rollout in the Hunter. So essentially a group of very wise women got together who were supporters of people with disability in the Hunter, some of whom were also people with disability, and basically looking at what a service recipient response to the NDIS would be and how to support people who were really trying to understand how the NDIS would work and how it would actually better the needs of people who were actually applying for the NDIS in its infancy. Since that time, CDAH has gradually grown into a much larger organisation which is still very much peer-led. It is led by people with disability. All of our board members are people with disability. I'm the CEO, I have a disability. My colleague here, Jared, who is also a person with disability, and virtually all of our members are either people with disability or associate members are either people with disability outside of the Hunter or supporters of people with disability, including family members. So CDAH is an organisation that now does a lot of things as well as supporting people with disability. A lot of that is around mentoring people with disability. So a new member comes into CDAH, somebody who is in the community, has very little supports around them, and feels that that connection with other people with disability is a really important part of their life. And for a lot of the people that are members of CDAH, it's been life-changing to be able to be somebody who's very isolated in your community. And I know Don was talking earlier about isolation for people, for ageing people in the community. It's a very similar thing for people with disability, and it really is that whole conversation about disempowerment in the community. It's not just aged care, it's not just other marginalised groups, people with mental health issues, people with disability, people with all three of those things. Those intersectionalities are definitely there very broadly in the community, and same with substance and alcohol abuse as well. So, there are, people with disability are also lots of other things. So, really, that opportunity for people to connect with their peers, anybody with a disability can join CDAH. What you get as a member is the opportunity to join a peer group or help form a peer group. We have several peer groups which are basically members who have come up with issues or things that they really want to connect with other people with similar needs or similar aspirations in the community. We have our Deafblind Connect, which is, Deafblind Connect is basically, it's a peer group, but it's also a funded program for people who are deafblind in the community, who basically really have very, very little opportunities to communicate with the outside world because there are so few interpreters in the Hunter, and particularly interpreters who have deafblind experience and working with finger spelling or tactile interpreting, which is a real skill. So for people to actually connect with each other, it is virtually, for many people, the only chance they have to communicate in the community. So being able to come to the CDAH office, we have every fortnight we have our deafblind drop-in, which anything up to 40 people attend. And it's just an amazing day where people just get to find out things. And a good example of that was during COVID, when we saw that negative triaging of people with disability, people in the aged care sector as well, where essentially we all heard the stories about people dying with underlying health conditions. Well, that was us. And so when our members are hearing that, hey, and it was all right, it was an underlying health condition, you say, well, I could be next. And there was such an acceptance of that broadly. To be able to communicate that in our own community, to be able to explain to a person who's deafblind what a RAT test is, how to do a RAT test, why you need to be have your immunisation or your vaccination. It's a really complex thing to be able to do. So to be able to do that with your peers and have that support through that process is huge. So other peer groups that we have definitely is Speak Up Hunter, which is giving people with intellectual disability a voice in the community. So many people with intellectual disability spend their entire lives having other people talking for them and other people making decisions for them. So to be able to be in a space where you make decisions with your peers, you talk about the challenges of not being heard. And often it's family members that are speaking for you as well. So being able to get amongst your peers and not have to have mum, dad or whoever else talking for you is just such a liberating thing, such a real power and strength in that. One of our board members at CDAH is we always look to have somebody with an intellectual disability on our board, because that gives real strength and voice to people with intellectual disability. Queer Peers is one of our new peer groups, which has been incredibly popular. So for so many people who have a disability, to not be able to talk about sexuality, to be seen as an infant or a child for your entire life, is such a big thing in your life. But to be able to come along to a group with other people who are questioning their sexuality, questioning their gender, just having questions in general, and being able to say this is a safe space where I can be, is huge. And in I think 12 months, Jared, we have nearly 50 members of that peer group, with people coming out of the community just going, I want to know about this. I want a place to be able to talk about this. So that in itself is a really great peer group, and it's amazing. And that whole peer group was devised by two peers within CEDA who said, we think that there's a need for people to be able to be heard in this space. And suddenly, everybody wanted to be heard. So that's one of the other great things we do. We have a housing group, we have a women's group, there's other groups too. We have one around education and training and around employment to be able to support people with disability who really want to work. We hear Dylan Alcott talking a lot about how people with disability want jobs, but we haven't seen that barometer shift in the last 10, 15 years about people with disability engaging in real work. By the way, CEDA employs 15 people with disability currently, all of whom are on award wages. We have no supported wages at CEDA, and we rail strongly against supported wages outside of where there's a necessity for it, and wherever there is any capacity for people to go from supported wage to a real wage, every step should be taken to ensure that is possible for that individual. Other programs we're involved in. One is Count Us In, which is currently City of Newcastle Council running their festival, which is really in September, which is really about building the profile of people with disability in the community. So of course CEDA are very happy to partner with City of Newcastle on that to really showcase what we do. So Queer Peers will be hosting an event during that festival, as will Speak Up Hunter and other peer groups as well. So we'll be also involved in a disability employment forum as well. So those particular events are really important to us because that really showcases what people with disability can do. Membership of CEDA is very simple. If you're a person with a disability and you reside in the Hunter, it will cost you $1 a year. You can enrol online. We have a very, very tough scrutineering process. Basically, if you say I have a disability, you're in. We are not medical experts, and we really don't want to know. And the really important thing about CEDA is that all means all. It is all people with disability. It is not a particular type of disability. There are no judgments around what your disability is or whether you're more or less disabled than somebody else. It amazes me every day that I come to work that I never ever hear those conversations. I've never heard it's easy for you, or what would you know, you haven't been in my life. And it just doesn't happen. And so we get to spend our time talking about the goals that we have, the aspirations, the challenges we face collectively. So that sort of leads me also to our latest aspiration, which is Disco. We've just started a soft launch of this, which Disco is basically Disability Connect, or you can use the code for whatever you want. You can say it's Disability Company, Disability Co-Design, which is what I particularly like. And that is, we are setting up a business arm of CEDA, which is basically people with lived experience of disability working alongside other organisations, co-designing and as lived experience change consultants. We know that there is so much work that needs to be done across so many organisations, because we hear all the time organisations saying, oh, we tried to recruit people with disability, it didn't work, it was a failure, so we don't go back there because it's too hard. But to be able to sit down with an organisation or leaders of organisations and say, there needs to be a real cultural shift in this organisation for this to happen. It's one thing for a CEO or an executive to say, we want to recruit people with disability, and that trickles down through the business, but there's no infrastructure around it, there's no conversations around it. Somebody comes into the workplace, it's a failure because they don't feel connected, they don't feel supported, it didn't work well, they leave, everyone says, oh, that didn't work, so we won't do it again. Rather than saying this takes a whole cultural shift within an organisation. It is one thing to have an aspiration at the top, but you need your HR department, you need, even when you're advertising for people to come and work for you, if it's not inviting people with disability, they don't come. I have 2 degrees and a master's. I have been knocked back for nearly 30 jobs in my time, and I'd like to think it's because of my disability, not because I was crap at the interview. But essentially, I can't drive. So often, the essential criteria of must have a New South Wales driver's licence, even if I don't have to drive, it's an essential criteria. You don't get the job because nobody in the HR department will even bend on that criteria. And that's just one situation, and that's, so often for so many people with disability, there are so many barriers. And if organisations don't understand those barriers, because if you don't walk in that world, you don't understand it. So that opportunity to see that cultural shift about how do we do this better? How do we triage people better at hospital? How do we do all of these things that we do? How do we attract students into our education programs? If we don't have a whole organisation approach to it, which is hard work and takes time, it doesn't succeed and it doesn't stick, and people with disability don't get their needs met. So we're very much working in that space, and very happy to work in that space, and very happy to get paid for working in that space, because we really believe that as consultants we should be basically honoured with the same remuneration as other people get. For 2 reasons. 1, we like the money, and 2, everybody likes the money, and if you don't pay for it, you don't value it, sadly. And I've worked a lot in remote education in the Northern Territory in a former life. We used to do a lot of free funded programs supporting employment in remote communities. Nobody ever turned up because no employers ever made people turn up because nobody valued it. As soon as it became fee for service, we had all these service providers saying, why aren't you at training? I'm paying for this. So if we get people to pay for it, beauty.
Andrew, have you had organisations then already who have expressed an interest in that type of model?
Yeah, very much so.
Who want to consult with you? So what types of organisations have expressed interest?
Disability service providers, which is really the biggest area that we've been trying to line up, because, but also other industries as well. We're actually working with a council around supporting their DA, which is really important work. But particularly, the setting up for working with disability service providers is critical, because one of the scariest things we ever hear is when we say, you need to be more person-centred in the way you do your work. And the first thing we hear is, we already do that. Then you know you're in trouble. Because if we already do that, we've already got the blinkers on and we're not listening. So being more person-centred, and we know that with a lot of disability service providers, there's so much task focus in the work that they do. And there has to be, we understand that. But to be able to say, how do I remember at all times when I'm doing my job that I'm here supporting you, and that your NDIS funding is what pays for me to be able to support you, but I'm very, very busy making sure the tasks are met every day and you get left out of the conversation. So being able to get people to just rethink that and just reset and say, well, how does that work better? How do we attract people with disability into disability support provision? There's such a shortage of disability support workers in the broader community, but we're not employing people with disabilities who can walk alongside and really empathise with a person with a disability, but we're not employing them in the workplace. And we're certainly not employing them further up. So if Imagine a world where we have people with a disability managing and supporting and overseeing disability support workers to say, no, you don't get it. This is how you do it better. So, you know, there's all sorts of opportunities. So, yeah. And one of the things is we're a little cautious about how fast we tread, and we're also very reticent of the work that we won't take on. If we think it's tokenistic work and it's just about ticking a box to say, hey, we did some training with people with disabilities and we've got it now, it's like a lot of places will do reconciliation plans, cultural awareness plans, and then they sit nicely in a cupboard or on a certificate on the wall, and we never enact them. So if that's the work that we're engaged in, we won't engage in that work. It has to be real. Because one of the things that's very, very important for people with disability who do this work is that every day that we do it, we share our own trauma and our multiple traumas in our own lives to explain how it feels for a person with disability when you are shut out. So having to do that every day and seeing no change is exhausting. But if you see change, then it's worth it. So that's that part of it. So that's basically CEDA. Have I left anything out, Jared?
The HIP.
Well, that was HIEP was one of our programs as well, which we did some work with a disability service provider providing residential support, and that was all about taking a more person-centred approach to the work they did. And a lot of organisations, we've seen Disability Royal Commission, the findings are starting to trickle out of that, and it's going to be a rush when it does. I very firmly believe that when the findings of the Royal Commission come out, we will be inundated with organisations saying we need to get better at this. But we're already seeing some that already realise they need to be better at that, and HIEP was with, and I'm quite happy to say who it was with the Disability Trust, who came to us a year and a half ago saying, we need to get more person-centred in the work we do. We need to move away from being task-related. Because I think one of the things, and Don, you'd very likely agree with this, is that when you're in a position of disempowerment, and for an ageing person, for a person with disability, all too often, all of this, we talk about support, but the underlying thing with support is power. Because somebody has the power over you, the power to exert, and it is only goodwill of that person that allows you to have that person-centred response. Because essentially, if I'll use a very simple example, we're all in the bus going from our group home or our SIL, and we say, right, we're having McDonald's for lunch. Somebody in the back says, I don't want McDonald's. Yeah, but everyone else wants McDonald's, so we go for McDonald's. In that moment, you've just taken voice, choice and control away from that person, and that person does not get a choice in the outcome. We're going for McDonald's. Or I could say, well, okay, is everybody okay if we all go and get McDonald's and we'll go to where you wanted to go? Or let's negotiate this, let's talk through how this could look better. But we rarely do, because we're time poor, we're busy, and it's just easy to take away that goodwill for that moment and just exert your power over that person. And this happens to people with disability every day. And even down to, if I want to go back to my example of being knocked back for a job because I don't drive, when somebody in HR department says, well, that's the way it is, well, that's the way it is. And nobody says, actually, that's a ridiculous piece of criteria, I don't even know what's in there. Let's waive that, or let's get together and talk about what our criteria should look like. But if we don't, then that door gets shut, and those doors get shut all the time. So one of the big functions of CEDA is to get those doors open and keep them open. So, thank you. Disability here, or anybody you know with a disability who you think may be interested in joining CEDA, just our contact detail for our website is just CEDAH, CDAH.org.au, and as Jared has made sure of it, we're on all social platforms as well. So that's